Hello everyone. Today I am going to do a comparison between rough, cold pressed and hot pressed watercolor paper. This is a pack I got from Brustro. It has 18 sheets of A6 sized papers. They are all 100% cotton. This pack has 6 sheets of each type. 6 of the rough, 6 of cold pressed and 6 of the hot pressed. Let's start off by looking at the textures of the different papers. As you can see, the rough paper is very textured. Here is the cold pressed watercolor paper, and here it is next to the rough. And finally, here is the hot pressed watercolor paper, and this is the smoothest. So let's start off on the rough watercolor paper. I am loading this up with water. I'm applying a wash all over it to see how well it absorbs water, how quickly it dries, and also if there's any buckling. As you can see, this is very good with water. There's a uniform sheen all over it. There's no pooling, and there is some bending, but there is no warping or buckling. I didn't tape down any of the papers as I worked, just so that I could see if there was any warping. I'm now doing a little bit of wet on wet. The pigment is doing very well on this paper, and I'm able to move it around quite nicely. It's also allowing for very nice blending. I tried to lift the paint and it worked pretty nicely. I found this paper to be very sturdy. It can take a lot of water and a lot of brushwork. While I waited for this to dry, I decided to try out a floral design on the rough watercolor paper. I checked to see how much bleeding I can get by touching two colors. And I also dropped a little bit of yellow into the petals to see how it would react. I'm going to repeat the same thing with the cold pressed watercolor paper. I'm applying a wash all over the paper. Again, there's a nice sheen all over it with no pooling. I'm going to paint the exact same landscape using the same techniques. Compared to the rough, I felt like the cold pressed used less water and it needed less pigment. Once again, I'm also going to try a floral design. Here are the rough and cold pressed flowers next to each other. Now that this has dried, I am continuing the landscape on the cold pressed paper. There is a very clear difference between the two paintings, not just in the texture, but the cold pressed seems a little brighter even though it used less pigment compared to the rough paper. And finally, moving on to the hot pressed paper, I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. All three papers held up very well with the water wash because they are, after all, 100% cotton. This one I feel used the least pigment compared to the other two papers. And again, as my landscape was drying, I tried a floral on the hot pressed watercolor paper. Here are the three flowers next to each other. You can see the difference in the way the paint has reacted with the paper and also the textures. It is very smooth to paint on this paper. and it's needing very little pigment. You can see all three papers here, and I hope this helps you decide which one you would prefer to paint on.